Hey, happy Monday, everybody. Now, listen, I usually do these on Sunday evening, but this weekend, and I even had it on my calendar to do, I was in Palm Springs and I was with girlfriends. We'd all been vaccinated and we had a great time in Palm Springs. But to be honest with you, I just didn't get to the Facebook Live. We were having a little bit too much fun. But I am here today to do the Facebook Live. I'm excited to do this topic, and I bet you this is a topic that many of you struggle with. I know I struggle with it. I think everybody in my world close by to me struggles with it. So I wanted to talk to you about it today and talk about why do we struggle with this topic and how we might be able to do it a little bit better. Now, the topic today is just really how to have those conversations that we know we need to have, but we aren't having. For some reason, hi, Tom, good to see you. Hey, for some reason, these challenging conversations we just put them off and we keep putting them off, or we go about them in a way that really doesn't get us what we really want out of the conversation. We've built up so much emotion around them that we go in on attack mode, or we make a lot of assumptions, or we just assume the assumptions. We assume what we think we know what the other person is saying, wants, or needs. So anyway, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how to have better difficult conversations or challenging conversations, or whatever you want to call them. The conversations you know you need to have, but you aren't having. And first of all, let's just talk about why they're so challenging. Most of the time when I ask people, why is it that we avoid these conversations? And I do lots of workshops in the corporate world about this topic. Most of the time, it's because we don't know how to manage, or we don't know what to expect from the other person. We think there's going to be a strong emotion that comes up. We're afraid that we won't be able to manage their emotions. And so we just avoid having the conversations. Sometimes we're even too scared. We don't know how to start these conversations. We're afraid of how we ourselves might manage our own emotional states. You know, we can go into fight or flight. We can start attacking for sure. And, over long-term relationships and patterns are created that people can get stuck into. Now, this topic has come up for a couple of reasons. One, I started watching Bridgerton. Anyone watch that show on Netflix? And I loved it. And yet, one of the things that drove me crazy, especially towards the end, spoiler alert, and maybe you noticed this too, that the two main characters, when they got married, they both had things that they needed to share with their prospective partners, the people they're about to marry, and they didn't. Oh my gosh. The guy just announces, I'm not having children. And she doesn't question what is the motive behind that? What's behind that? I don't know. I felt like, of course, we can't have drama if people aren't in conflict, but I was like, oh, all of this could have just easily gone away if they would have had conversations. And, if you look at every drama or every show, if the characters could just have healthy conversations, there wouldn't be half the drama that we would have. So that was the first thing that I saw. And then while I was away over the weekend with some girlfriends, we got into a great conversation around, they're all three married. I'm the only single one. And, the long-term patterns that people get into when they have difficult conversations, and how one person can be, can completely shut down and not be able to stay engaged in the conversation. And one person can go on the attack, and the small petty things that we can all do in those conversations. And I realized that even though I'm not partnered, I definitely have a mom that I'm in a pattern conversation relationship. Oh, you're so welcome, Sharon. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. So we can get into these patterns of how we engage with each other, which immediately brings up our judgment, right? We start assuming the other person is wrong. It's their fault. And we lose the curiosity. And you know me, right? I know if you've been around me anytime at all, you've heard me say that curiosity trumps judgment all the time, right? Curiosity and judgment can't live in the same space, and you're just going to have healthier relationships if you can be curious. Now, just last week, I'm sure my mom's not going to see this, so I'm going to talk about it. She sent me a text at 8:30 in the morning, and I was going into a coaching intensive. I was a 9-day coaching intensive, and it started right at 8:30. I did see the text, but I didn't respond. And the text was a little passive aggressive, and it said, "Hey, you must be too busy I haven't heard from you in a few days." Fair. She hadn't. And I went through the intensive, and between 11 and 12, there was a break. And so instead of texting my mom, that's on me, I took my dog for a walk. And while I was outside on the walk, who should call but my mom? And my mom said, I picked up, "Hi, Mom. Oh, so you're alive." Okay. So it went into a little bit longer conversation, and she and I have some pretty codependent patterns in our conversation. I'm really practicing trying to stay in the moment and share what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling. But in this particular case, she was trapped in an old, tired pattern. And it ended up with basically a shutdown, and she ended the conversation. Mom never ever saw the antidote either, Tom. So I have pretty good faith she's not going to see this. And so I was frustrated, and I sent a text and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm sorry that I didn't text. I also wish that we could get to a point where we could have a conversation and you could share your feelings in a way that allowed me to hear you fully, and just let's explore them." And her response back was, "Oh, I guess I was the one who responded incorrectly." And I was like, "Oh boy." Okay. It's a pattern, right? I let it go because I knew I could talk to her in the morning, and I did. Called her the next day, and I said, "Hi, Mom, how are you?" "Fine, honey. How are you?" Like nothing happened. "Fine, how are you?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I talked to Peggy last night, a friend of hers, and I realized I was just tired. She'd been out in her yard all day, and she was tired and sore." I said, "Well, thanks for sharing that, Mom. I had a feeling you were in pain in some way or another, and I didn't know if it was emotional pain or physical pain, so that's why I wanted to call you." I mean, these challenging conversations are everywhere. They can be in our closest relationships. They can be in the workplace. They can be in our communities, our neighborhoods. And so we often stop ourselves from having them because of the emotional toil, the emotional drain that we're going to have. Now, I'm not talking about narcissistic partnerships. I'm not going to go into that because I think that's a whole nother beast and a whole nother animal. I am talking about just your average Joe, your person that you need to have a conversation with, the person you love, your boss, your employee. Maybe you don't love your boss or employee, but the closest people to you that you need to have conversations with. So here's some steps that I think we can take to better have these conversations. And the first one is to start with yourself. I know. Thanks, Sharon. Listen, so let's start with ourselves when we think about we want to have one of these conversations. And oftentimes what goes into it is we start building up our case like we're Department of Justice, and we're bringing in all of our facts and figures. When we're not bringing into is any curiosity about the other person, what they might be experiencing in this moment, what might their side of the story be, and not in a way that we can peel it back or make it more judgmental, but how do we see a perspective that might actually help us have this conversation? So sometimes one of the things that I give my clients and in the corporate space is just a question, 3 questions to ask. What do you want out of this relationship or this conversation? What do you want out of the conversation? Well, it could be that I want this relationship to be stronger. I want my needs met. I want to be heard. Great. But what do you think the other person wants? Or what do you want for them? Well, what I want for them, I guess I want them to be heard. I want them to know that I care about them. I want them to know that I'm trying to bring my best self into this conversation. I want them to be listened to. Okay. And then what do you want for the relationship? Well, I want the relationship to continue. I want it to get through this dark side. I want it to actually be stronger on the other side of this. I want it to end. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just that you have to think about what you want for yourself, what you want for the other person, and what you want for the relationship. And having that kind of narrowed down will help you go into it in a less attacking mode. Because if I know I want my partner to be heard, when I start attacking, if I can come back to what were my intentions before this, I may be able to stay more present in the moment. Now, let's be real. When you get into the moment, you're going to have reactions. Fight or flight mode is going to happen. You're going to have reaction. The body's going to go into an experience of fear. Your breath might shorten. You might start getting into protective mode, start attacking, defensiveness. If you can catch yourself in that moment, and that's a big if you can catch yourself in that moment, just come back to your breath. And remember, silence can be your friend. Not the stonewalling silence, not the silence that's glare and trying to kill them with your eyes, but is really just a silence of being able to take in the information that the person is giving you, right? They're trying to share something with you, could be not handled well, but there might be a nugget that you can hear and listen to that might actually help you or the relationship in the future. When you have one of these conversations, maybe in the very beginning, you just state what it is that you want out of the outcome of this conversation. Hey, I know this is going to be a challenging conversation. I just want you to know up front, I would like us to get through it in a way that we both feel like we're heard. All right. So there's a great intention that just starts at the beginning of this conversation. Or you might say, from my perspective, this is what I see is going on. And when you say something like my perspective, it lets the other person know that they also have the right to have a perspective. And when someone shares something that you completely disagree with, instead of telling them that they're wrong or they're an idiot or how could they, maybe you just share, oh, I have a different perspective. And that's it. Listen, when we're in these really tense conversations, we lose an awful lot of power when we use too many words, because every word you use can be used against you. And not, again, that you need to be silent, but oftentimes when we go round and round and round with everything and all the cases and all the information we want to share, and then we share it again in a different way, in a slightly different way, we lose a little bit of our intention and power. So state what you need to say and then open it up for a conversation as opposed to a mic drop. And obviously, if you want to have one of these conversations, find the right time to do it. It could possibly be that right after the workday isn't the right time. Right before bedtime may not be the right time. Consider both you, what's the right time for you, and the person you need to have this conversation with. Give them some decision-making on when to have this conversation so that you both can be present to it, as opposed to exhausted, tired, or hungry. Another thing to think about is when you're in one of these, it's really easy to start attacking the other person. But instead of attacking the person, why don't we just discuss the behavior? So, yeah. Oh, I know. So true, Sharon. Sharon just said, being able to find the understanding of the possibilities of their perspective, allowing multiple truths is such a helpful mindset for sure. Yeah, Sharon, we go into these conversations thinking that we have all the facts and figures, but how could we? There's a whole nother person involved in this conversation. And so when we can show up with curiosity, we're going to have hopefully a much better conversation. But here's the deal. You can't control necessarily everything, how the other person is going to react to this or respond to it. All you can do is really control your side of the street and not get hooked into a he said, she said, or she said, she said, or he said kind of a situation, but just control your responses and what you're saying. And the fact that you've already done some homework before the conversation of knowing what you want out of the conversation, what you want for them out of the conversation, and what you want for the relationship, again, can be super helpful. The other thing, as I was going back to that idea of speaking to the behavior and not the person, not you're a jerk or you're lazy, but I notice the towels are on the floor again. And that's a really frustrating, because I feel like we've had this conversation. What can we do to ensure the towels don't stay on the floor? Right? I know it feels like it, you don't want to go that extra mile, but if we condescend, or if we just say, why are the towels on the floor? You're not going to get what you ultimately want. Think about what you ultimately want. In an easy way, you just want the towels to lay off the floor, right? You don't want the towels on the floor. So if that's what you want, let's be smart about it. And how do you go out and approach these conversations as opposed to attack the person? Of course, you also obviously just want to allow the other person to speak, right? Make sure it's a dialogue and not a monologue. And how do you stay calm in the moment when they're speaking so that they can mirror you, as opposed to getting hooked into their emotion? This is the visual that I always used, is if I'm in a conversation and someone is getting heated, I imagine that they are building up a garbage suit of emotions. Like it's becoming big and bulky. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, they want to take their garbage suit off and hand it to me. They want me to wear that garbage suit. I'm not interested in it, and it doesn't fit me. So I can observe their behavior, but I don't need to get hooked into it. I can also call it out and say, feels like you're getting angry right here. Is there anything else you want to share with me? Or what else is coming up for you? And if I can stay calm in this moment, and again, not in a condescending way, but allowing my emotions to not get hooked, they might mirror me as opposed to me mirroring their energy. It's not an easy thing to do, for sure. But intention wise, if you go into it, and again, I always think of this as kind of experimenting. Like, what is it? Knowing you need to have this conversation, how can I experiment with doing this better? And if I call it an experiment, that I'm not so tied to the result, I'm tied to what did I learn in this experience? How did I just slightly do it different? And what did I figure out by slightly doing it differently? All right. After you have one of these conversations, I'm just going to encourage you to call it and say, here's what I felt in this, and here's what I'm feeling about you now. And if this is someone you love and you wanted the relationship to continue and build stronger, how can we get to the place of understanding that we are a team that is marching together versus adversaries going after each other? If there's a bigger thing that you two want, which is a loving, healthy relationship, how can we turn side by side and continue walking that way instead of butting heads, and making that part of the conversation? Y'all, this is Bridgerton. They got me whole started on this. Again, I started watching Bridgerton and I thought, why don't they just talk to each other? But having these conversations is not easy. I totally get it. And I am in deep practice of it for sure. And it's one of the things that I just put out there. I'm not in a partnered relationship right now. I'm not desperate. I would like to be. And this is one of the things I really want to practice. And that is, how do I stay in conversation with someone even when I'm mad, angry, and frustrated? So listen, I'm going to be practicing this right along with you. Happy Monday, everyone. Thanks for stopping by on this Facebook Live. I'll have a blog post about this week. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Bye, everybody.